Welcome to my podcast, Chief Energy Officer, Time to Lead. My name is Boris Diekmann, and today I'm joined by Yanine Sturhahn Bautista, who is, amongst her many roles as a human being, the VP Finance at Hitachi Energy in Dubai. Yanine, welcome, and thank you for making time for conscious human leadership.
Thank you very much. So for the invite, I'm honored to be here with you, Boris.
Well, the honor is mine, and I'm so delighted that we're across time zones. You're in Dubai today. I'm somewhere in Germany. And then you made time for that. Well, Yanine, just share a little bit more about yourself, about you, your role, and what gives you life.
Well, what am I? So I'm a human being, first of all, human being, a woman, a married woman with two wonderful monsters, and a dog, which I love with my whole heart, all of them part of my family. And that's for me the most important at all in my life. Um, what do I do professionally? So I work in finance. I've been working many years within the energy sector. Right now, with a role as a head of finance in Hitachi Energy for one business unit called Grid Automation. So proud also to be part of this world transformation. So to do the world more green, to work literally in technical solutions that helps all of us, including our nature and our world, to be more sustainable.
Well, thanks for sharing that to give our listeners just a little bit of context, and maybe we want to continue there because when I asked you, I don't know when it was, Yanine, a few months ago, and said, "Hey, would you be willing to join the Chief Energy Officer podcast?" And it didn't take a second, and you dropped a WhatsApp and said, "Sure, I'd love to."
Of course, of course.
And so when I ask you, what inspired you to be here today?
Many things, Boris. Starting from your very inspirational book, which is for me one of the most beautiful books that I've read in my life, especially because it's not a technical book, it's a conversation, what we are having today, actually. But it shows you so many beautiful things that it might happen in your life, not only on the professional life, but also in your private one. And that's why when you ask me about, to be your guest within this podcast, especially with the background, of course, of being a chief energy officer in your book, I thought that's one of the most beautiful things that I could do to participate with you and to give just a little bit of my humble thoughts to the world or to the audience who is going to listen to this podcast today.
Well, thank you for sharing it. It moves me when you say that because the reason why I ask you is because all the people who come here are, in my view, all real chief energy officers. Writing a book is one thing. It is inspired by people like you and that heartfelt intention to lead in a human-centric way, which is easily said and a constant daily journey, discovery, and struggle. And so, while building on this, if this podcast, if what would you love it to offer to our listeners? So, if people would experience our conversation, this little podcast, as as a beautiful little gift, what would you like them to find inside when they unwrap it?
I think one of the most important things that I would like to share is that doesn't matter in which content you are, so in which environment you are. So if you are in the professional environment or in your private, for me, what is really, really deep in my heart is that there is no issues at all to be vulnerable, so to be yourself and to be authentic. Um, Many people think that being vulnerable and authentic enough, for example, in a professional environment, is something that is a no-go, is something that is part of the political behavior within a company, showing kindness or showing, you know, so your normal behaviors, because all of us, we are human beings. And what I want to share today is part of your story, is part of also what you tells in the book, and what I truly believe is that despite of any business that you can do in any company, if you don't get to the point that you understand that the people with them you are working, with them you are interacting on daily basis, these people is the most precious asset that any company can have. And if you don't achieve to be so close to them and showing that there is a trustful relationship, really authentic and genuine, then it could be that you have a wonderful strategy, that you have wonderful possibilities in the market, that you have wonderful technology, but if you don't get to the really core of these people, showing that you are authentic and genuine, there is nothing to do in terms of successful business in my view. And there is a lot of people who needs to understand this. There is a lot of companies and cultures within the companies who they still believe is business what it drive the company. No, for me it's not. It's people who drive the business and then the company. So that's the most important message, or one of the most important messages that I want to share with you, and of course with the audience of this podcast.
Well, just carry on. So, how is that so? I mean, you're a head of finance. You know how to count money, and you know how it flows and where it comes from and when it goes, and you know how to read a balance sheet. So how come that a woman with your background says, the heart is not the opposite of business. It's the freaking source of business. So
Exactly.
share more about that.
Yeah, it's super funny because I always said I'm not the typical finance person. Yeah, and many persons they tell me exactly the same. I'm always happy to know about it. So, which doesn't mean, I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm not on top of what I need to do within my role, but I truly believe we all, companies as as persons and as organizations, everybody needs to have a purpose. And of course, when it comes to companies, there is always um, the goal to be successful and to be profitable. And this is also part of my job, right? But what I want to say is, even though I'm finance and I'm in, doesn't matter in which role I am, yeah. So I need to understand that whatever we are doing on business wise. So all the people is on board, all the people feels inspired, all the people feels motivated to get there, to have the same purpose within the company, within the organization. That's the most important thing. It's not easy, I have to admit, especially when you are in big corporates. You need to follow many guidelines and rules, of course, and some of them are, of course, part of your values as well. Otherwise, it would be difficult to follow. But on personal level, I also truly believe that you can have the people with you on board slowly, slowly, step by step. Nothing is going to happen from one day to another. So when you know someone for the first time, it happens to me and it happens to everybody all the time. When you change the role, when you even within the same organization or going out to another company. So you always have this fantastic chance to get to know another people, new people. And you only get the trust of those people when you start being yourself. And also building that trust is being yourself, being vulnerable, being open, being receptive, trying to listen, trying to observe. Um, this is why I said it's not easy, because sometimes we are not in the mood to be open, to listen, to observe. But at least, and I love one of the statements of your books, by the way, which I always use or try to use, is with awareness. With awareness come
Choice.
exactly. And this is the most difficult part, in my opinion. So to be aware of, to be aware how I feel, to be aware, okay, with my words, I'm impacting either negative or positive. You need to be aware of. So having all your senses, let's say, or your senses awake, then you can recognize, okay, I'm running in the right direction with the people around me, or do I need to adjust here or there? So that's more or
Uh,
less how I try to do when I come into a new role, or when I have people around me that I'm meeting for the first time.
I love when you said, leading with all senses.
Yeah,
Uh, I just read a quote an hour ago. Apparently, Aristotle said, "An education of the mind without an education of the heart is no education at all." Um,
absolutely.
so give us a little bit of an education, from your experience. And this is not a straight line, but a constant, I guess, a constant experiencing. If someone was asking you, leading with all senses, how can I practice that? I use my mind a lot and it serves me well.
Hmm.
I'd love to kind of expand my realm of leadership and like you, not with the intention of being perfect, but perfectly imperfect. Uh, how can I lead
Exactly.
more with my senses? If I walked with you, how would you teach me that?
That's an interesting question. So, it's very interesting to know that people, for example, like me, everybody would say, "Ah, Janine, but you are such an extrovert." So because, okay, well, if I take my background, I'm from Latin America, and then I like to talk, have no problem to get to know new people, etc., etc. This give me always, or give the people the impression that I'm extrovert, and I believe that as well that I'm extrovert. But answering to your question, I love to be an introvert from time to time as well, because that exactly gives me the ability to see things from another perspective. To give you an example, I would take you and I will tell you, Boris, let's sit together in this corner. Let's just observe with our eyes, with our ears, with our senses, without judging, just observing. And that give you a totally different perspective. Totally. I will never ever forget one time that we were doing a workshop, and it was a leadership workshop. So we were sitting all together in a circle. And then the moderator says, okay, guys, so pay attention what you see, because in 5 minutes, we're going to stand up and we're going to choose another seat. So we did so. And I was so amazed to discover that changing perceptions or changing perspective, sitting from, it was a simple exercise, sitting from one side to another side, it changed completely your perception. So that's the way how I would do. I would take you with me. I would sit you beside me, and I would tell you, so let's observe for a while. Yeah. I mean, if we have, depending on the time, if we're talking about months, years, or only one day, of course, we will choose to sit there. If it's one day, sit there, observe, listen, sense the differences between cultures, between even, I think is maybe small and maybe not so obvious, but even accents like mine, like yours, like, so you get to know a little bit about how this person might react, how this person might feel the things that we are discussing in that moment. In this way is what I mean. Also, leading with all your senses is you always will have around you totally different people, totally different characters, totally different personalities, and you cannot, in my opinion, it would be totally wrong from my side to get and set one fit for all. That would be for me a totally no go. I need to understand every single personality and try to adapt to their needs. Of course, it's always going to depend on how many persons are around you, or how many in leadership roles, how many persons are talking about direct reports. But independently of that, you need, first of all, to understand not everybody is the same, and everybody requires different needs.
And I often feel that in healthy organizations, these differences are not the problem, they're the solution. So,
Exactly, because this is part of the diversity that every organization benefits out of it. So it brings a lot of creativity, curiosity, different perspective, different ideas or new ideas. So
and
this is the way.
what I'm hearing is that you're opening the gates to gather more data, like, hey, Boris, and just sit there and notice. And I have a dear colleague, Catherine Fox is her name, and she coined the sentence for me, notice what you notice. And just sit there and notice what you notice.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned sometimes I like being an introvert.
Yeah, and I
and
love
being
it.
and being so I'd love to just pause there for a moment because you love it. And so being an introvert, that's like what?
That's like peace inside me. Like I can't be just part of it without being actively or without not being active because I'm active with my eyes and with my ears, but it's like not talking give me a lot of insights that I don't have and I don't see when I need to talk, when I need to be actively talking or communicating. You know, it's I do literally see it as two different shares having like the exercise that we did in the example that I shared with you, sitting in two totally different chairs, that it gives me the fantastic opportunity to see things in two different perspectives, from two different angles. And it gives me as well, sometimes, especially those moments, give me the chance to even do some self-reflection on if I'm sitting from this side in this chair, why I was thinking about X or Y while I was sitting on the other side. You get my point? So it opens like another dimension and it gives me a lot of peace and a lot of, yeah, self-reflection.
Well, thank you so much for describing this as much as possible. It's just sometimes hard to describe this in words. As soon as you do, you kind of destroy it, right? Because it is a wordless place. But it feels to me like you're creating when you're in a good state, and there are probably good days and bad days, but it feels to me
Totally.
like you're holding a lot of space inside yourself. It feels spacious. There's room for resonance, for reflecting, for is that fair to say? There's room, there's space inside of you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, as correctly said by you, there are always, I mean, that's life. There are always bad and good days. There are, yeah, some days in between. Yeah. Um, and of course, as much as you can try to be balanced, there are also days where you are not 100% on your good side as well. So especially those days is when I take a little bit more from this space inside myself, and I try to be the introvert to understand better things, situations, statements, etc., behaviors.
So let's follow the path that's kind of emerging as you're speaking. So you mentioned earlier on, in trying to lead with the heart. The heart is a big, it's at the center of it. And you also say, well, there are good days and bad days, and in the book I call it we're in different states, and open states of hearts and closed states
Exactly.
of hearts. How
Mm.
do you and you mentioned, with awareness comes choice. So how do you notice in your, how should I say, in your human operating system, right? How do you notice, oops, this is me in a more closed state of heart? What are some signals that you pick up in your in the Yanina operating system that let you know, hey, this is with no judgment, this is me in a more closed state of heart.
Mhm. Um, I mean, physically, I totally recognize and I'm aware of it when I'm in that physically spoken. I mean, um, when I get a little bit anxious or to get something done or some an answer or the right answer. I believe what I believe is the right answer.
Mm.
Um, um, when I sometimes even if I share my opinion, um, because I do realize sometimes I do realize, and it's too late especially when you are having a position when the people is listening to you and you are injecting immediately when you said your opinion, you are injecting immediately in their heads what they believe I want, and that's something that I notice in the right moment after I do my statement, um, or when I feel disturbed or when I feel uncomfortable or when I fear something, which is also very pretty much natural.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I said. I believe we need to understand, we all of us, we need to understand that being vulnerable in the professional content and environment is nothing but right, because it buys within the group and the team and the organization where you are the trust that is required to get the people inspired and motivated to get on board.
It's interesting you're mentioning this. So when you notice that, so fear is an essential feeling. I believe like it's like some other essential feelings like joy and anger and all those feelings. If nature didn't need it, it wouldn't have bothered to create it in the first place. So all of
Mhm.
this is probably intelligence. So let's just pause there for a moment and then maybe move on from there. So when you're sensing that and you're noticing your more close state of heart, what's happening to that space, that spaciousness that you're mentioning? What's happening to that spaciousness?
It creates like a fire alarm. Because I'm immediately aware what is happening and I
Yeah.
know that is not 100% correct, so that is this moment when you realize, okay, Yanine, either you take the right way and path and correct it immediately, or everything is gonna be, so damaged from now onward. Um, Very often, I'm a person who tries to be. I try to be aware of what I'm feeling. Of course, I'm not. I mean, I'm not perfect at all, and sometimes, even if I'm aware, I let it go. you know. So
Because you
uh,
can.
exactly, exactly. But that's what happened. I mean, immediately, it's like an alarm. Okay, Janine, you are
Hmm.
going. Your sensors or your alarm is already
I can
uh,
almost sense
turned
the
on.
inner chatter that is going on, you know. Yanina speaking to feeling. Hello, feeling. Feeling speaking to Yanina. Yeah, hey, I'm there. I'm called fear and
Exactly,
worry. How are you doing? And
exactly,
and
exactly.
and I think you're pointing to something that see if this resonates with you. I often have a sense that we consider feelings a private matter. These are my feelings, and there is a belief that they stay inside. When actually what you're pointing to, they're not a private matter at all. Number one, because they can be sensed instantly. My
Absolutely,
subconscious knows already in which place you are. And secondly, it's not your private business at all because it affects everything that you're doing and
of
everything that you
course.
say. Um, has it ever happened to you that you were in conversations and you're sharing, hey, so I'm just noticed I'm a little bit irritated. Has that ever happened that you're sharing it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what
So I
happens when you do
even,
that?
yeah, well, it depends with whom you are talking to, right?
Mm,
So I mean,
mm,
it's always like this. If another person is a conscious person who also share the practice on being aware on what is happening, so that person is gonna understand immediately what I'm saying, right? But if it's another person who just is not aware of, yeah, or is not at that level that uh, to be even willing to be aware of, um, then either nothing happens because it's like words and that's it. Okay, Yanine is saying something, yeah. Or if it's someone who is curious, is gonna ask, "What do you mean by that?" Yeah.
indeed.
So what about you? So now I'm taking the moderation.
Oh,
What
that's
about
what I love
you?
about it.
Because I believe you have plenty of experience on that. So have you had that experience, and how is it? Which are
I
the
think it's
reactions?
so depends. I'd say if I'm conscious enough so that there's a little bit of a distance between me and my feelings, and I'm still capable of noticing them. And if I have the courage and the clarity to share that, I said, can you just share what's happening for me right now? I'm feeling insecure, or I'm 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 a little bit concerned about this. I've always felt it helped me to gain some so make that feeling and something that is observable and that we can talk about. It makes the
Hmm.
unspeakable speakable.
Hmm.
But I also felt like it furthers the conversation because someone else might say, well, say more. What is that feeling telling you? There's wisdom behind it. It's not about, well, let me tell you something to calm your fear. It's like what's in a healthy state, fear is our intelligence that scans for dangers. It's wisdom projected in the future to protect us from further hurt. So it's a powerful feeling. And I think as a leader, you
Absolutely.
have a chance to ignore that. Like we're not supposed to feel fear or worry. So and I'm still practicing. And another thing that I find helpful is to just check in from time to time and just and rather than asking, so what do you think about this, what we've discussed? And very deliberately ask, so how do you feel? How do you feel about this? And just quiet down and see what's coming up. And somebody else might say, yeah, I feel the same thing. All
Hmm.
right, okay,
Hmm.
say more. What's there? So that might be a perspective. And actually, you're giving me an idea. I think fear is such a powerful feeling.
Absolutely.
And in the current world, there are enough things to be worried about. We can't always have them front of mind. If you think about it, in an environment that is fast and challenging, and where everyone in your team comes both with a large portion of innate health, they're born with that. And at the same time, we all bring our portion of fear into the room, right? What are a few things that you consciously, well, do or pay attention to transform fear into hope, to create an environment where people thrive, feel safe? What are a couple of things that in my second lesson with you, right, second month, what would you teach me then and show me around how you're constantly transforming emotions?
Well, I mean, before talking about fear, I think it's important also to mention that when it comes to a situation like, for example, your question, yeah, would you share this with another person? I think there are types of feeling that are easier to share with another person, just to check, okay, if the another person is feeling like you or seeing the same or feeling the same. Like, for example, if you are angry or if you are sad, I believe it's easier to share these type of feelings, especially I'm still in the professional environment. When you said, okay, now I'm too upset to continue talking about it, or now I feel really like frustrated. Let's let's make a break and talk about it tomorrow or whatever. But fear is, as correctly mentioned it by you, fear is I believe, I agree with you, is unbelievable, powerful feeling where not everybody, including myself, is willing to share in the right moment where you are feeling that with another person, right? Especially in in the professional environment. So when you feel insecure, when you are having fear to answer something or that you did something or whatever, this is something that I was reflecting while you were talking, and I discovered, okay, sharing my feelings, I don't know if that's has something to do with from where I come. Latin America is very easy for Latin American people generalizing to share feelings. But fear, unless it's, so it's a situation, a lion is in front of me, okay? That's another story. But in the professional environment, I haven't in my life experienced that someone says, you know what, Janina, or myself even. So you know what? Let's make a break or a pause because I really I'm afraid of something and I'm
Hmm.
afraid that So it's very rare, very
Yeah.
rare.
Well, fear comes in all colors, right? So I think in the
Absolutely,
people call it concern. I'm worried. I'm not
exactly,
sure. These are just little brothers and
exactly.
sisters of the same essential
Yeah,
emotion.
exactly.
So when you meet it, whether it is pronounced or not, how do you use your power as a leader? Because I think you're given power for a certain purpose. How do you use your power to transform such energies into higher vibrations of hope, perspective, faith, confidence, call it whatever you want, that allow
Hmm.
people to get results in a healthy, sustainable way? What are a couple of things
Hmm.
in your repertoire that seem to have an impact?
I mean, one of the most powerful ones, which I believe, at least for me, have worked, is to be honest and direct without being unpolite, um, asking question to understand why why. Uh, I believe in the why as a um, super powerful question when it comes to feelings, especially so, or to a situation, because if you don't take the time to understand the background of the things, then you can be easily judging things, situations, persons, etc. So, but if you take the time to understand the why behind, not not why in terms of uh, you should have been done this or that or
Why did
whatever.
you do
No,
that?
exactly. Not in that sense, definitely not. But why do you think that this or that happens, or which is why is the reason, or which is the reason uh, why you went there, or where you felt in that way. um, and being honest and direct, as I said before, in a polite way.
Mm.
I think that opens a door. It's a small door, but opens a door for the other person to see, okay, it's not a judgment day, or it's not a difficult um, conversation. Is for sure something that is genuinely, she is genuinely curious to know what happened and what is the reason. And it might be the case that I'm feeling whatever I feel, and I might share that with that person. I'm being direct. I'm not being impolite, and I want to understand if it would be something that I could do to get things done better. In my case, when I'm the person who is in the strange and difficult situation, I use exactly the same. But I always notice that I need time, and this is why I think I try to put myself in the shoes of another person. And I said, well, when something happens, I always said feedback is the key thing to be successful if you want to get uh, the trust of your team or of your colleagues. Feedback, bi-directional feedback, not
Mm.
only one direction, bi-direction feedback. So when you get feedback, in my opinion, you need to, of course, get it in the moment. You're not going to wait 1 year after so to tell the person um, whatever feedback, positive or to improve. And the same way is it when you have these kind of situations. It's like giving feedback or receiving feedback. It needs to be in the moment. Maybe for certain situations, as I said, so closing the circle where I was starting a few minutes ago, maybe, and sometimes when I'm the one who is in a certain situation, I need like a space, a little bit space. It doesn't need to be immediately. It's exactly the same what we were talking before about the feelings. Sometimes you feel in X way and you need a break. So just
Mm.
not to let the feelings, feel the thoughts and the words um, in the wrong direction. But if it's a if it's a negative situation or a negative topic, what we are talking about. Um, I
So,
try to
yeah.
create a space which is not so far away from the point of the moment, situation, action, you know, and then opening this little door to let another person know. And in the same way, if I'm on the other side, um, that we can talk about it in an open and direct way.
I find this so wonderfully paradoxical what you're sharing. And I think in so many ways you're pointing to the paradox of leadership. We're constantly between two seemingly opposing poles. So on the one hand, you said,
Absolutely.
I'm doing my best to speak truth respectfully, right? And in the Code of the Samurai, which speaks about the stance of the noble warrior, it says the noble warrior speaks difficult truths respectfully. While at the
Exactly.
same time, you're saying, when I can, I'm staying curious, help me understand. Why is it you look at it that way? So it's both there. And then you were pointing to, um, on the one hand, being in asking for feedback in the moment, whilst it's real, whilst the emotion is there. Tell me, how did that feel for you? And what do you want to share with me? And at the same time, you said, and sometimes I need some spaciousness. I need some space in between. There's no right and wrong. It's this constant dance between the two. That's what I find so wonderful about what you're sharing.
Absolutely. I was laughing one time. So it was like 2 weeks ago. I was reading some articles about leadership, and I was laughing because I always said that for me, leadership without being myself or being authentic, for me personally, it couldn't be in another way. I cannot split my personality into one in the office and another one in private. But I know many people they can, yeah. And I wonder, I mean, so it's good for them that they can do it. I can't, yeah.
Mhm.
But I was laughing because I was reading some articles, and I always have also reading about authenticity in leadership. And I found last week or 2 weeks ago, I found an article that states exactly the contrary, and it's a leadership article, right? So no, no, no. So this time is leadership. So you don't need to be authentic. So you need to play a role. You need to, and I was like, okay. So in leadership, there is so much about leadership, but I think at the end of the day, you need to be yourself. You need to be comfortable with what you believe, your values, your principle, and how you behave with the people around you. And I think the best, um, the best temperature measure for that is to see how people around you is feeling. If they are happy around you, if they are, if they feel motivated, if they spark joy, if they really um, are feeling comfortable talking to you difficult things, if they share with you even mistakes before you find out, if um, if they feel comfortable to come to you anytime, doesn't matter what. That's for me the best way how to measure the temperature on, okay, how are we doing as a team within the organization. It is something that I feel they truly can speak up. They truly can come to me with any topic. They truly, as I said, spark joy. Then I feel happy.
So you're saying the degree to which you kind of measure yourself, whether your leadership is effective, right? If the service that you're providing as a leader is actually received, is on the one hand, the degree to which people's eyes are sparkling, which reminds
Exactly.
me of the very first conversation we had with a very dear friend, Oliver Bruins, who said it's all about the sparkle in their eyes, on the one hand. And on the other hand, to host that other feeling of worry, concern, so that it feels safe enough for that imperfection to exist as well. Here's something I don't quite get. It's that's kind of how you consider, how am I doing as a leader? Is that what you're saying?
Not that I measure that. I mean, so
Figuratively.
in the
Yeah.
exactly in the
Yeah.
literally
Yeah. Yeah.
spoken, but is the way how I also feel at the end of the day, right? Because I feel happy, and I feel I'm doing things in a good way when I see the people around me having this trust and this close relationship. that I can't even one day, or as I used to be very, so with um, how can I describe that? So I always joking. They said, "Yeah, you are always happy." No, it doesn't mean that I'm literally always happy, but I try to do my best in order. Why should I do my life miserable only because I don't know, something is happening? Let's find together something, a solution. And saying that, what I want to say is, I feel happy, I feel comfortable, I feel that I'm in a good path when the people around me is feeling the same, you know,
Just
that there
feeding in both
are
ways, right?
exactly it's like it's a flow, it's a flow. And when you are in that flow, you also sense when something is out of the flow. It's easy to recognize it. And then it's when the right moment comes and we need to be more, um, pay more attention or take this person aside and have a individual conversation just to touch base and understand if it's something happening. Um, that's um, that's easy to say, not so easy to do at the end of the day, because as you correctly said as well, business on daily basis can give you ups and downs, but to find a balance so that these ups are more often is the key factor. Yeah,
And I love it how you're saying, this is this not like, I do this. It's a constant, sometimes I call it wobbling forward, right? Constant
exactly.
experimenting. And you mentioned this, and I know there are tons of opinions about the word authentic, and the way I look at growth for leaders, it's probably this journey of with every step to include more of who you are and to exclude less, to
Hmm.
include more of the things that you haven't given a place yet, also the ugly parts, or that we label that way, and to not exclude anymore all those other things, the darker part. And maybe that is another way of looking at authenticity. And if you look at your future, your evolution, let's say we had the pleasure of doing that again in 2 years' time.
Yeah,
Maybe when you're on a trip in Germany and we can meet here, or I am on a trip in Dubai. What is
exactly.
something that, and regardless of how this may happen, what would you love to, if you could evolve as a leader, what would you love to learn to include more and to exclude less in your own leadership?
Oh my God, this is a tough question. What would I include more? I would include more these spaces that I spoke at the beginning, being introvert, observing and listening more. Definitely. It it gives me it gives me not only peace but also understanding and even knowledge, I would say. So mm, I learned a lot being like this. Definitely. Um, exclude. What would exclude?
Exclude less.
Exclude less. Exclude less.
Yeah. What is something where you sometimes feel I'm not allowing this, where you might think, well, maybe I make space for that.
Well, maybe one of the things is to short a little bit the time that I need to give or receive this feedback, I always try to do it on time. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. When something is bothering me, so when something is eating me inside, I used to take a little bit more time or a longer time than the time that I wish to express it. And maybe this is something that I indeed need to not only learn, but also, how is it? Exclude less.
Oh, Amy, thank you for I don't know how to express my appreciation for that, but just allowing yourself to be with that question. And as Robert Koch said one day, some questions are too good to be spoiled by an answer. They're more, when we're walking questions, we can become walking answers, as some of my teachers said. And so looking forward, if you had a magic wand and you could make one wish that would make all our organizations just significantly better led, what would you wish for?
Yeah, that's gonna be a very long wish.
Yeah, but the
A
fairy
very
tale
long one
only
wish.
gives you one.
Exactly.
Not the fairy tale, the fairy.
That people in the professional environment and corporates and startups and all type of professional environments understand that leading doesn't mean pushing, doesn't mean succeeding, doesn't mean bringing business. Leading means inspiring, bringing the people with you, understanding, asking questions before judging. Leading is motivating, is bringing spark within the team, within the organizations, having one purpose and everyone being on board with that one purpose, feeling inspired, not because of we need to do so or it's a business, and in the business we don't talk about feelings and emotions and whatever. No, it's just understanding, please, understanding that you are getting the goal and the purpose of your organization because you are having the people inspired around you, motivated with you.
And if your wish was fulfilled, right? So you woke up the next morning and you don't know it is fulfilled, but it was fulfilled. How would you know? How would you notice that your wish was heard?
I would I would do it immediately because of the way on how people is talking each other. Because if someone is questioning something, is questioning in a way that it doesn't take him or her respect, or it doesn't take away the neither the respect nor the authority that you have because you are showing kindness and curiosity and being a human being talking to another human being.
Oh, wonderful. I could see that, and I can see how that would benefit our organizations largely, infinitely. Um, thank you so much. I don't know if you noticed that an hour has passed, almost like nothing, and I could continue for another hour. And in a sense, we
Me
will
too.
constantly. Thank you for, well, not only talking about vulnerability, but being vulnerable in this conversation, knowing this is recorded and many people will hear it. And I would love to invite our listeners to share thoughts, share feedback, so that this can also become a community of leaders supporting each other in this way. Share it on LinkedIn, share it on Spotify, share it wherever you want to. Um, thank you for making yourself available. Chances like these are rare, and bringing this out in the open. I'm really moved by this. Think it's a privilege that we can do this and contribute to the world in this way. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure, totally, dear Boris, and thank you very much for the invitation. It was a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you very much.